Thursday. So that means we had to catch up with one of our favorite guests all week long, our buddy Tom Haberstroh, back on the drive on a Thursday afternoon. Tommy, how you doing, bud?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. So I want to know what the Tom Haberstroh confidence level is today that we're going to see NBA basketball and we're going to see the season conclude.
I think it's pretty good. We have a memo, a 113-page memo outlining the safety and health protocols for the league. So I would say we're at a 90% chance, probably 95% chance we see some basketball at the end of July.
Man, that makes me overjoyed. That makes me so happy. That's good to hear. Tell me, Tom, just specifically what you like most about the plan, what you're on board with, and what still needs to be ironed out in your opinion.
Yeah, so I think the best thing, and what I've talked to epidemiologists about, is just the fact that it's on one closed campus. Some leagues are trying to do multiple sites, have teams play in different cities, but that's the number one thing, is just having this sequestered with lots of rules at one site. And it looks like they're going to do daily testing or close to it, which is also a good thing. The thing that I'm really nervous about is 7 weeks without seeing family or friends allowed into the bubble. I think that's good in spirit, but in reality it remains to be seen.
What do you think the biggest pitfalls are, roadblocks are, between this day and 42 days away when we actually start playing? What still needs to be ironed out?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's how protective is this bubble going to be? There's a lot of exemptions or loopholes, I guess you'd say. The prior approval, you can leave the bubble to go see, an ill family member or go to a funeral or something like that. And as one GM told me, we're going to see a rise in ill family members over the first, few weeks of this thing. And that's the question is, Danny Green mentioned it yesterday, is the biggest concern is how closed, how airtight is this bubble going to be? How liberal are they going to be with letting players go in and out? And I know that players are going to be tempted to get an Airbnb outside of the bubble, just in Orlando with their family, and try to go and visit that. But I just don't know. All these plans are good on paper, but as we know, things are easier said than done. And keeping 300 plus players and staff, probably at close to 1,500 people in the same place, is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be really, really extremely expensive to do. And the other thing I'll point out is we don't even have the schedule. We do not have the schedule of what those 8 games, those seeding games, are going to be for the players and for each team. And so it's amazing to me that of all the things we do have, whether it's the dates, the health protocols, it is funny that we just don't even have a schedule yet of what these teams are going to play. And I think that's interesting. Is we're sitting here on June 18th. They're about to fly in 3 weeks from now, less than 3 weeks from now, and we still don't know who they're going to play.
I'm seeing on your timeline, and I read something similar, where the WHO says governments shouldn't reopen unless their percentage positive rate remains 5% lower for at least 14 days. And look, I know that it's tough to, one of the things that's a bummer is we can't agree upon what's true. And that's such a problem. And it's such a failure at the top of our leadership. It was a half-assed lockdown. It was a clunky reopen. And no one really knows exactly what's what. And so that to me is problematic. But Tom, today it's reported that Florida is reporting their highest number of positive COVID tests as far as what happened overnight since this whole thing started, over 3,700 positive tests. Is there anything there as it pertains to whether or not this thing settles at all that could dissuade the league from going to Florida, even kind of?
Yeah, that's where the 10% lies here. That's why I'm not saying 100% that this gets off the ground. Because of those rising tests, there seems to be an outbreak happening in several cities in Florida. And again, there's not a lot of consensus on which number to look at, but the biggest number to look at from epidemiologist perspective is the daily hospitalization rate. The daily hospitalization rate tells you how serious and how sick those people who are going to the hospital are. And most states track that. Most states publish that data. Guess which state does not publish daily hospitalization rates?
Florida. Sweet.
One of 7 states in America that, coincidentally or not, does not publish daily hospitalization rates, which epidemiologists believe might be the best indicator, single number indicator about how serious a spread is in a given community. And notice that the first state to have fans at a NASCAR race was?
Florida.
And where did the RNC move their convention from Charlotte, North Carolina to what state?
West Virginia. Just kidding, Florida.
It is Florida. So the NBA, the RNC, NASCAR, they're all convening to Florida, which is also a state that has a steep rise in coronavirus cases. So, Orange County, Florida, where Orlando is, where the Walt Disney World Resort is having a steep rise in not just positive tests, but in terms of the percent positive. And like you said, the World Health Organization is suggesting that you should keep it at 5% positive or fewer, meaning 5% of those tests that you administer are coming back positive. Now, if it's 5 or fewer over the previous 14 days, it recommends go ahead, open up start reopening your economy. In Florida, in Orange County in particular, it is hitting over 5% in each of the last 6 or 7 days. So this has to turn around quickly for the NBA to be able to feel good about opening up its doors in Orlando, because right now it's not looking good.
To kind of go back a little bit about, and you wrote about this, and you guys, you should read Tom. I say every week at Tom Haberstroh on Twitter. Haberstroh is Haberstroh. I full disclosure, I have not been tested for COVID. I'm young, I'm healthy, so I feel good. But I have friends who have been tested. I have a buddy who's a dentist, and in order for him to reopen his practice, he had to go get tested and has been tested a couple of different times. And he describes it as literally the most uncomfortable thing he's ever had to go through. So I understand why a lot of these Disney employees aren't necessarily keen on the plan of being tested every time they come and go from the bubble. But at the same time, I understand why players might be concerned about that. What is your understanding about the understanding with Disney employees being able to come and go as they please without being tested?
Well, there are a few things here. I would trust your doctor. I think he's right, is that the deep nasal swab test is really uncomfortable. I have not done it, but I have family members who have done it, and it's not pleasant. And it's one of the reasons why the NBA is not doing that test daily with its players. They're doing a shallow nose test and or a saliva test in the throat. And so I think there was pushback from the players being like, yes, we know that the deep nasal swab is the most accurate and maybe the best one to use on a one-time basis. But when you're getting that thing put down up your nasal passage, tickling your brain every day, your sinuses are going to get pretty raw after the first few times doing that. So they agreed that if they're going to do daily tests or around that, regular tests, that they would do something a little less invasive. It might be not as accurate, but the hope is that they do it frequently enough that you'd be able to test a positive right away. Now, the Disney employees is a real concern. The Disney employees are represented by a very strong union. Over 30,000 members at the Disney World Resort alone are unionized. And when I've been speaking with their union officials about this bubble, they said they haven't even been broached by Disney about the NBA's resume, which means that they are not going to be under the same protocols as the NBA players and staff that are going there. So imagine this. You go as a Disney support staff, a Disney cast member as they're called. You work as a housekeeper or a custodian or a culinary worker. You go into the bubble and they say, all right, we gotta test you. The test is a daily screening of, hey, how you feeling? You got any coughs? Are you feeling chilly, et cetera, et cetera? No, I'm good. All right, we're going to do a temperature check to make sure that you don't have a fever. Okay, the temperature check reads 100.3. You're You're free to go in, sir. That's what it is. The temperature check for Disney employees, if you register 100.4 or above, then they do a recheck, and then if you still do 100.4, then you're not allowed in. But if you check in with 100.3 fever twice in a row, or just even once, you can go into work. And so they don't have the same protocols, the same tests that players are, and it's worrying because there was a study in Orlando that 1 out of every 5 positive tests are asymptomatic, meaning that if you test 5 people who have the coronavirus, 4 of them might show symptoms, but at least 1 of them is not. And so when you have hundreds and hundreds of staffers coming into your bubble every day, that's a troubling statistic. So that's one thing. When I posted that story, lots of NBA players were upset about that. They tweeted, like several of them tweeted, quote tweeting with a comment saying, what? Like, WTF? I think J.J. Redick responded, so it isn't a bubble? ? And so I think players are surprised by that double standard. But unfortunately for the NBA, in order for those Disney employees to be under the same quarantine or under the same restrictions, they would likely have to pay a boatload of money to make them come to the table and agree to those conditions. And that's worrisome on another level, which is if you're not making a whole lot of money and you're the primary income bringer in your household, you probably are going to want to continue working even if you're not feeling great, even if you're not feeling 100%. You might just say, hey, I got to get these paychecks. I can't afford to miss work. And so, yes, I might not be feeling 100%, but I need to go to work to support my family.
My gosh, man, there's just so much here. And that's why, I've really leaned on you in a lot of different ways. And I feel like I'm more pessimistic now than you are. And it makes me feel confident that we're going to see hoops because I know you're plugged in. But, Tommy, no, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, you asked me if this is going to happen, not whether it's going to finish, right?
Yes.
So I am less confident that this is going to see itself through to October. I think it's going to get off the ground, most likely, 90% chance that it gets off the ground. But I do recognize that there is going to be probably some positive tests. We're seeing it all over college campuses right now with their football programs coming back for voluntary workouts. I saw today that University of Texas football had something like 13 positive tests. Don't quote me on that, but there's a lot around the college football scene. And I just think that once we get going in Orlando and considering the outbreak we're seeing in Orange County, if that continues, I think the NBA is going to get there, but I'm less confident that they're going to be able to see this through for 3 months while trying to handle the Disney employees, the players going in and out for various reasons, and also just the morale of not seeing family and friends for 7 weeks, how that kind of weighs on your psyche as a player.
So, and I would agree with that. That's kind of the lane that I've fallen in as well. And there may not be a way to know this exactly specifically, so I will not hold you to it. But let's just say the league goes down there, they start, and they make it, 3 or 4 weeks, and then it all falls apart. What are the financial implications of that if the league cancels after a couple of weeks as opposed to just canceling altogether? All right, let's see if we can get Tom back because I want to get his take on that one question. It did sound like he was in a car or something like that. It sounded like Tommy's got a beautiful, cute little girl. So maybe he's doing the parenting stuff. But so pay attention to what Tom says. If you guys are just hopping in your car, turning on your radio or firing up the app or however you listen, first of all, hello, how are you? Second of all, this is really important information because Tom is pointing out a bunch of things that are really pertinent and important to consider when it comes to the restart and maybe potentially the end of the season as Tom joins us once again. So, Tom, my question is, we keep hearing this $2.4 billion economic impact should the league cancel altogether, which it doesn't just change the league this year, Tom. It changes the league moving forward for a long, long time. If the league starts, plays for a couple of weeks, and doesn't finish, economically, what does that mean? And elaborate what it means for the future, not just the present.
It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but what I can say is that if it starts up but doesn't finish and shuts down, I think the likelihood that we start next season on time is very, very low, because I think they have to reevaluate all their systems. I think the objective next season is to have at least some fans in attendance. I know The Athletic was reporting that the Players Association, the expectation was that there would be no fans for the entire next season, according to The Athletic. But I do think that if things fell apart, this is their best foot forward. They have several weeks and a couple months of planning to get to this point, and I just don't know what it will look like in the fall when most epidemiologists and doctors expect a second wave during the flu season. I just don't know if this doesn't work how they'll be able to come up with a magic bullet solution for the fall and going into December. So I think that's the other thing that people don't quite realize is if they spend all this money on buying tests, on buying the facilities, on the plane tickets to get there, on all of that, that's real costs. There's a real possibility that the NBA could have just said, look, we're not going to spend any of that money and we're just going to save it and just cut our losses and not do a season. But instead they're going to pay a lot of upfront money to get this thing off the ground. And if they don't get much revenue for it and the morale just of not being able to get this off the ground, and I just think they would have to go back to the drawing board, and it might be several months before we see the NBA again.
Jeez. All right, buddy. Last thing, we'll set you loose on this. We know what Kyrie has been saying and the support he's received from some of his peers and some of his players. And look, I enjoy, I like Kyrie. I know some people don't, and there's a paradoxical nature to him that I like. And sometimes it can get a little crazy with the flat Earth stuff, but I really feel like he wants to do what's right by himself and his community. How real do you think the potential threat of losing some of the big stars of the league are to this dynamic when it comes to them wanting to do the right thing socially?
Yeah, I think it's a real question. It's hard to know at this point what Damian Lillard, C.J. McCollum, Donovan Mitchell, the Kyrie Irving, Dwight Howard, these not quite superstars, but big-name players, if one of them drops out, Spence, I think that's the big question, is once someone drops out, I think a lot of players will be more motivated to follow suit. They will be the only player to do it. And so that's the question for me is, will any of them drop out? Because as soon as one of them does, I think it'll break the seal, so to speak, and you might see more follow. I don't think it'll be just a one player and that's it. I also think that Kyrie Irving, the fact that he isn't playing because he's injured, I also think that muddles the message too, because I think some players are looking at that being like, hey, you're not even going to be in this thing. Why are you speaking out so strongly? And I get it. He's an NBA player. He's part of the union. He's a star. He carries a lot of voice. But I do think that once a player of a Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell stature decides, look, it's not for me, I'm going to sit this out, then it's going to be a problem for the league.
Right on, man.